Okay, so the next job that I've got to do is this ram. It's a new fender blend door, fairly simple. It's just straight white. PW7 is the paint code, and I thought it'd be a good idea just to kind of go over the basics of using Axalta Cromax Pro. It is a little bit of a different process compared to some other systems, as it is a 1.5 coat base coat process. Just a couple little maybe tips and tricks that might help some people out. So everything that I'm gonna do to this fender, I'm gonna do to the door. So this fender, because it's a new fender, I'm gonna have to seal it, base coat, and then clear coat, just like the door. And that's just a personal preference of mine, is I like to do the same thing to my blend panel that I'm doing to the new panel. So on the door, I'm going to seal it, even if it's just on the edge, and the rest of it doesn't need sealer. Seal it so that that edge is the same color as the edge of the fender, and then carry on, do my base coat, and then clear it. As far as the base coat operation goes, I will be using a wet bed, even though it's not really necessary on a solid white. I always like to use a wet bed just to kind of make sure that everything's going to lay down properly. Sometimes if you don't use a wet bed, you'll get a little bit of sand piling or like a seediness look at the edge of your blend. Using that wet bed is just going to prevent that from happening. Like I said, normally on solid colors it won't happen. If I'm ever doing like a very small blend, I won't use wet bed, but on a big door like this, it's never a bad idea to just, you know, throw down that wet bed and save a little bit of time. Might save you some polishing at the end of the job. So it's always a good idea to go in with a plan with Axalta, just because the process is so quick. So I already know the steps that I'm going to be taking to do this job, and it's just going to be back to back to back, really quick. So like I said, I'll be applying wet bed over the entire door except for the repair area. And the reason for that is I want the color going over the repair area to be at its full strength. Everywhere where the wet bed is, it's going to dilute the color a little bit and help it blend out. So wet bed on the full panel, and then I'm going to immediately grab my color, start with my blend. So I'll take my blend as far as I want it to go. So on this door, I'll probably blend kind of in a diagonal pattern and taper it off. It's a lot harder to see a blend that goes diagonally than just straight up and down. So yeah, I'll take my blend as far as I want it to go, and then I'll immediately follow up with a close wet coat over the repair area to get coverage, and then I'll immediately back off and do, they would call it a half coat. With metallics, it's a orientation coat, and this is just to ensure coverage on solid colors. Like, we just want to make sure that all of this primer area is going to be completely covered. So I'll follow that up with a half coat. Once the half coat's done, I'm going to put the blowers on it, let it dry completely. Once it's dry, we can clear it. It's a very simple process. It's a very quick process. But yeah, I'll get started, and if I think of anything else to explain, I'll let you know. Okay, so everything's blown and tacked off. It's ready for sealer. I'm going to start on the fender here. It's always important to use the correct value shade of sealer. It's just going to help with coverage. So on a lighter job, we're going to want to use a lighter sealer, value shade 1 or 2. On a darker job, we'll use value shade 7. And there's anywhere between every code, every different color, every code will have its own value shade. So you got to make sure that you're using the right one so that we get the proper coverage. You'll notice, like, I'm using a light gray, a value shade 2. The reason for that is if I use a value shade 1 over this dark black E-coat over the new fender, it's not going to cover very well, and it could affect our color. So I always like to use value shade 2. It's what works for me. So yeah, I'm gonna start with the fender here, and then I'm going to just quickly put a little bit over the edge of this door and maybe just a little bit over the edge of this burn through just to cover that up, and then we'll be ready for base coat. Let that flash for 15 minutes or so, and then we'll be ready for base coat. You might have noticed when I was coming to this edge here, I'm angling the gun towards the repair area, not towards our blend. We're gonna save this, try not to get any color on this edge so that we're not affecting the match between the two doors. The color is fairly close regardless, just because it is a new fender, we're butting right up to this hood. But we're going to do everything that we can to leave the color that's on the door originally to match the rear door, because of course they already match. Okay, we're going to start with our blend now. This is dry for a good 10-15 minutes, the sealer. So yeah, like I said, wet bed, and then immediately followed up by a coat and a half of base coat, and then we're done. Here we go. I'm noticing right away that that primer area is just not quite covered yet. So I'm just going to let this sit for a good 30 seconds. I'm going to follow it up with a second full coat, and that'll get me my full coverage, and then I'm going to follow that up with the half coat. So that's another thing with this system is if you ever run into a lack of coverage on certain colors, white's usually not too bad, but I don't know if you can tell on camera, but you can slightly see the primer edge. You can always put on another coat, just got to give it enough time in between, and then when you're drying the base coat, you also have to make sure that it's completely dehydrated, because we want to make sure that all of that water has gotten out of the panel before we clear. So yeah, I'm just going to follow this up with another second coat here, and then immediately with my half coat. that, it's done. So I'm going to now put the blowers on it to dehydrate. I'm just going to hit this end just for safety. And yeah, just put the blowers on it, dehydrate it fully. I also have to finish the fender, of course. Once that's all dry, we'll move on to clear coat. And you can see we've got maybe just a little bit of color at the bottom here, but the rest of the door, there's no color from our blend. So I think we've done a pretty good job with that. Like I said, the color is really, really close as it is, so that little bit of color on the bottom of the door isn't really going to affect us too much. So yeah, when we're ready for clear, then we'll get that going again. Another thing that I thought I'd mention is because we did do 2.5 coats on the door, we have to do 2.5 coats on the fender. We always do exactly what we did on the blend panel as we do on our new panel, or vice versa. That way that if there is any sort of color difference or coverage or whatever it may be, it's the exact same between the fender and the door. So yeah, I just did 2.5 coats on the fender. We're going to let this dry, and then we'll move on to clear coat. So a couple little tips. It's always a good idea to get into the booth with a light and check for your coverage. Shut the lights off, get your sun gun, get a light. This is my Axalta speed light. And we're just checking to see if we can see that primer area, which we can't. And this has been drying for 5 minutes or so. And another little tip is you should always try to, before you clear, measure your panel temperature. So I've got this Mastercraft laser temperature gauge. It's like $30 or so. And all I'm going to do is take the temperature of a panel that hasn't been painted. So let's do this rear door. I'm just going to shine the laser on there. It says 77 degrees. Now I'm going to move into the back edge of the door. 76 degrees, very, very close. So anything within a degree is usually okay. But what we don't want to see, and what I suspect at the front of this door where we put a lot of color, is this front of this door is at 66 degrees. So it's still got a ways to go yet before it's dry. So even though it looks dry, it's not dry. So it's always a good idea to double check with your temperature gauge to make sure that your panels are dry before you move on to clear coat. So I'll just let this dry for another 5-10 more minutes, and we'll move on to clear coat. So now that our base coat's dry, we're ready for clear coat. Once it's cleared, we're done. Another job, and we'll move on to the next one. So here we go. Finished up. If there's something that you want to see in a future video, let me know. That is blending basics with Axalta Cromax Pro.